always amuses me, is one in Shrewsbury, between Fish Street and High Street. Sorry, Fish Street and Market Street. And it's only a small passageway linking the two streets. And it's called Grove Lane. Just to prove it's not happening. So you wonder what on earth went on in this dingy passage that caused it to be called Grove Lane. Now it always raises a bit of a laugh, but the answer is a little more serious, a little more light, less light. And it's because, if anyone's familiar with Shrewsbury, there's a lot of very old buildings there. And of course, in these sort of 15th, 16th, 17th century buildings were extended as they went up. So Grove Passage actually was quite dark before public lighting. So I guess for most of the day it was quite dingy and dark. And the story is people used to have to feel their way along the wall, broke your way along the passage. Simple as that. There's another funny one. It's amusing me because my mother stood out below the street nameplate, and that's Teetotal Street. That's in St Anne's. Now, there's obviously a story there that someone will go into. Anyway, street naming was formalised, if you like, in the 1840s. Town Police Clauses Act of 1847 gave urban sanitary authorities the power to number and name streets. So this came about because if you think 1840, we had the introduction of the penny post. So the ability to send letters anywhere in the UK for a penny opened up a whole new industry, if you like. People could write, send letters. There were more and more commercial letters, more and more private correspondence went by what we now know as the Royal Mail. So in order, previous to that, you could probably get away with writing a letter to somebody saying Philip Evans, Llandudno, and they'd know who it was. The towns got bigger, villages got bigger, more buildings going up, so it was necessary to provide formal addresses so the post delivery people by this time were able to correctly see that the mail got to the right person. Llandudno had an Improvement Act of 1854, which created a board of commissioners who were, if you like, the predecessor of the local authority. And the board of commissioners were empowered themselves to name and number streets, and indeed some streets were actually named within the Act. And that Act set out how the town was to be developed. So we had some names like Mostyn Street, Glover Street, Lloyd Street were named in the Act. Mostyn Street. These were all Mostyn family names, because Mostyn was the Mostyn family were the big landowners. They own most, if not all, they own most of Llandudno, certainly the low-lying part that lives outside Cragydon, because that was in separate ownership. We also had things went on. There was another act, the Public Health Act of 1925, which simplified the system for numbering and naming, which in fact is still the power used today by the local authority. And anybody in the room can propose the name of a street. It's a very simple process. The local authorities try to make it complicated, but it isn't. It's very simple. You just fill in the form and say we want to call that, attach a bit of a plan showing it. If there isn't an objection, that becomes the name. And the local authority are obliged, it's not a discretionary power, they're obliged to put the nameplate. and they must, if there isn't one there, they have to put one. So remember that, if you've got one missing in your area, the chances are, if you read the 25 Act, they've got to provide it. It's not an if or a but, or maybe, or we haven't got the money, got to do it, which they forget. So, okay. Now the street names in Llandudno follow different themes. I referred to the Mostyn connection. Now the Mostyn family, contrary to a lot of belief, the Mostyn family actually go back way back before the Norman conquest in North Wales. So a very old family, and they married into other families who were equally historic families in the North Wales region. So you've got names like Trevor Street, you see that is from one of the ancestors, he was a Welsh prince in medieval times. So they do draw on these names from family history, as well as sort of contemporary history for the time they were in. We've got a street called Clonmel Street. Now Clonmel is a town in Ireland, in Eire. That street is just off Mostyn Street. It's Mostyn Street and the promenade, the Alex Hotel's on the corner. And you may wonder why, because I'm not aware of any other town in mainland Britain that's got one called Clonmel Street. And the reason is that there was a young lady called Lady Henrietta Scott, who married the second Baron Mostyn. She was the daughter of the Earl of Clonmel. And indeed, her sister-in-law, because her brother had inherited the title, 1865, the dowager as she was, Countess of Clonmel, stayed in number 5 Neville Crescent in Llandudno for 2 months with half her family and a couple of servants. Took over the whole little hotel. That's what we called the Heath House Hotel. But this was quite common in those days. Rich families would come here and they would literally take over one of the promenade houses, as most of them were in those days, big houses. So there was this link, and clearly the link went on with the Clonmel, because lots of people spell it with the E, it isn't. It's actually the family name of the Marquis of Abergavenny. Now, the third Baron Mostyn married Lady Henrietta Augusta Neville, who was the daughter. So that's where we get Neville Crescent coming in. It's also where we get Augusta Street coming in. Yeah? And in fairness, Lady Augusta, as she was known here, was a very philanthropic lady who gave land. She was effectively the trustee because her husband died young. So her son was a miner, so she effectively ran the estate and did a lot of good works in the town. She created the Mostyn Gallery, well, exclusively really for female artists, because she wanted to encourage female artists, but she found out that the Royal Cambrian Gallery in Conway wouldn't accept women as members, because she thought, right, I'll have my own. So, yes, so there's an interesting little one with this Abergavenny connection, because between the venue Cymru and Cae Mawr, there's quite a nice car park for the Cae Mawr Hotel that's not long been surfaced. And originally, if you look very carefully, you'll see a gate post behind it on the thing. It's called Sefton Gate. That was the original name of part of the hotel. But there was actually an unmade street there with curbstones heading towards the swimming pool is now. That was originally going to be another link road, but it's called Abergavenny Road. but it was never completed because of the Second World War, and it was never made up. And it still belonged to Moston, who eventually, I assume, leased it to the hotel as a car park. Then we get another theme is Alice, and of course the Alice connection in Llandudno is well documented by other people. Now, in the early 70s, a street several streets of houses were created, known as Little Park, between the town and Croydon, mainly bungalows. And the developer, decided to ask Ivor Wynne-Jones, who was a prominent local historian and quite a reputable journalist of the era. But they asked Ivor Wynne-Jones to suggest names for these streets on Little Park. So Ivor decided to have an acrostic. Does anybody know what an acrostic is? You do, because you've been before. Yeah, an acrostic is where the initial letter of a word, and you carry on, it spells out something related to the words as a whole. Yeah, so Ivor came up with this acrostic. So we've got Alice Gardens, Lorena Grove, Isis Court, Cuffnell's Close and Emery Down. These are all elements from the Alice books, but if you read the letters, they spell Alice. So then the council got involved for the second phase. So Ivor came up with his acrostic for the second phase. There is a little drive, there is a Lewis Close, and there it really ends, because the I became, whatever he was going to use for I, became Queensway, and the E became Lewis, after Lewis Carroll. So the council in meddling messed up the second part of the acrostic. I don't think many people even living in Little Park know all this joke. Right. Castles and halls and Welsh stately homes is another theme. And this is broadly a quarter, if you like, of the area, bounded by Maesty Avenue, Maesty Road, and Conway Road going up to Llanrwst. So within that, we've got things like, originally, Rhuddlan Avenue, after Rhuddlan Castle, Gwydir Road, Gwydir Castle, Pennant Court, Pennant Hall, Bodnant Road, Bodnant Hall, and they go on and on. And even until the last sort of 20 years, we've got Gamaris Drive, Erthig Close, Kimmel Avenue, I think. I don't remember off the top of my head. But they've continued this theme in that part of the town, that they have these names after Welsh stately homes, castles and so on. Now, I did mention import of names. In Penrhyn Bay, there's some streets that have quite unusual names. Hartsville Avenue, Carolina Crescent, these were, the land was owned by a family called Lowry, who moved to Penrhyn Bay in the 1920s. And they decided to develop some of the area, and they gave some land for Bowling Green and Pavilion. It was called Penrhyn New Hall. And part of this development, there were some houses built on these streets, and they called them Hartsville Avenue, Carolina Crescent. These names are taken from South Carolina, because the Lowrys had business interests in South Carolina. So we've actually got these names that Not only they've come from down the road, they've come from America to Llandudno. Anyway. So you do get these quite unusual ones. So there might be something in the Hereford one similar to that. I mentioned commemorative namings. We've got Prince Edward Square up here, where the cenotaph is. Prince Edward Square was specifically named by the council in 1911 to commemorate the investiture of Carnarvon of the Prince of Wales, who was in those days was Prince Edward. And most of us will remember the Duke of Windsor, I guess. Craigydon boasts some unusual names, never seen anywhere else. You've got Carmen Silver Road, Silver Gardens North, Silver Gardens South. Well, they're very unusual. You've also got Romania Drive, Romania Crescent. These commemorate the visit by Queen Elizabeth of Romania to the town. She was only here 3 weeks, but I think she left her mark. Now, Queen Elizabeth of Romania had a stage name. She was quite a talented lady. She wrote sort of little plays and operettas. She was a musician. She was very talented artist. So I'll pass that round just so you can see. But that's one of her productions. Yeah, Queen Elizabeth. Then we've also got Father Elizabeth and Father Orsted. These are some council houses built up near the hospital. They commemorate the visit in 1963 of the Queen and Father Elizabeth Road. And we've also got Father Orsted. Now Orsted relates to the Gorses stones, and the visit in 63 coincided with the Royal National Eisteddfod being held in Llandudno. And as part of the Eisteddfod process, they always leave this Gorses of stones when that's up in Happy Valley. So they named the other street after the Eisteddfod. Most places have got a number of streets and avenues and roads named after saints, and Llandudno was no exception at all. You know, we've got St Hilary's Road, George Street, and St George's Place. George Street was originally St George's Street. Somewhere along the line somebody forgot to put the saint on the nameplate when it was reordered, I guess, and it simply became George Street, but the original name was St George's. We've got St Wino's Road, St Cyril's Road, St Margaret's Drive, St Andrew's Avenue. You know, they go on. Some of them actually commemorate churches. St Hilary's Church, St Andrew's Avenue. There was a little mission church in that area of the town, of Trinity Avenue, and that was used until about 1960, and then it was derelict and it burnt down, unfortunately. So you do get these. Now, Craigydon, again, we've got streets there. There's quite a gathering of streets that are named after British politicians and statesmen of the late Victorian, early Edwardian era. So we get Morley Road. I didn't know who Morley was either. But Morley was the Chief Secretary of Ireland. Curzon Road, Curzon was the Viceroy of India and then Foreign Secretary. Balfour Road, Balfour the Prime Minister. Harcourt Road, Sir William Harcourt was another prominent MP. Rosebery, after Lord Rosebery was Prime Minister 4 times. Then in other parts of the town we've got W.M. Hughes, W.M. Hughes was Prime Minister of Australia during the First World War. Came to Llandudno, we think at least twice. On one occasion met Lloyd George because they were quite friendly. They were the only two Welsh-speaking Prime Ministers in the British Empire, ever, those two. William Morris Hughes went to school in what's his name, that's the old Caersalem Chapel at the tram station. Then we've got Ackley Close, Churchill Close, Lloyd George Close. One of my friends was a devout Liberal Democrat, he's in the House of Lords now. He was very agreed there wasn't a street named after Lloyd George, because Lloyd George was the MP for the area in which Llandudno found itself for 50 years, so you know, there's a good argument. So we had a new development going up, and the other councillor and I had a chat, and he said, well, we'll go along with it, but for political balance, the other two streets will call one Ackley Close and the other Churchill Close. So that worked. That they were really happy. The arts are represented alongside the Grand Theatre, or Broadway Boulevard as it's called these days. There's what appears to be the car park of Broadway Boulevard, and it goes past the Sailing Club. It was actually one of these unmade roads, but it was named by the UDC, and it was called Irving Road. Now, Irving, you think, but there was a guy called H.B. Irving, who had his own theatre company, and he was clearly at what was then the Grand Theatre. So I don't know what happened to Mr. Irving, but clearly they felt moved to name a street after him. So you can see a picture, he's there looking a bit like Charles I, I think, whatever he's supposed to be playing. Yeah. Then we've got Hercombe Road and Hercombe Crescent. Again, two very unusual names, but they relate to Sir Hubert von Hercombe. Now, Hubert von Hercombe was a prominent artist in the 19th century. He was of German extraction, hence his name. He founded the Slade School of Art. His connection with here is he married into a family in the Vale of Fluid. But we had an Eisteddfod here in 1898, one of the Welsh National Eisteddfods. Hercombe designed the roads and the crown for the winning guard. And obviously the council were overjoyed at this, this great man having participated, and when we led him to carve and silver and Rebecca and all this, promote the resort, streets named after all these people. Revere Avenue. Now again, this is someone who's named, there's a street in Colwyn Bay named after him, and there's a street named in Llandudno in Craigie. Craigie features a lot in this talk, I know. So we've got two streets, 4 miles apart, named after Revere. Revere was a musician who again had his own orchestra. He put on various, what we now call shows and entertainments in the town. He fell out with Llandudno. He was quite one of these very musical people who fell out with people, I think. And he went over to Colwyn Bay, and then he fell out with them and he went to Blackpool. But they did name these two streets after him. I've actually got a letter from them here to Mrs. Elias Jones in 1897. And it's from the Hotel Victoria in Northumberland Avenue in London. I know Victoria, Northumberland Avenue, it's where the Sherlock Holmes pub is. I've been in there a few times. Dear Mrs. Jones, here I am. I'm putting my papers this morning. Going through my papers this morning, I discovered I have not answered your kind note. It was very kind of you to send me a few lines on the occasion of my birthday. I am pleased to say that I am in good health and spirits, busy preparing my engagements, instrumental and vocal, for the next season at Morecambe. So it's obviously off to Morecambe now. How I wish it was for Llandudno. Ever yours sincerely, Revere. So that's, I must send this to the county archives actually, because it's probably the only remnant of the name we've got it. Social protection, now this is one I enjoy talking about. Developers, since we've had developers of housing, have usually liked to call their developments something that's marketable, something cosy, something posh, to encourage people to buy their properties as opposed to Joe Glance's down the road. So we've had these. The Links Hotel at the end of Maesty Road. Just along from opposite the Links, just along, there is a cul-de-sac. And the cul-de-sac is called Belvedere Place. Okay. There's only about 5, 6 houses in the cul-de-sac. If you look down, standing Maesty, not literally in Maesty Road, but on the pavement on the other side. If you look down Maesty Road, down Belvedere Place, you will see the house at the end, huge date, 1936. And you think, well, okay, yeah. So 1936 Belvedere Place. Now what happened in 1936? No. Okay. Well, there were a few things happened where the Spanish Civil War, there was something else. But the most important thing here was the abdication crisis. Now, the houses began to be built in late 1935. January 36, we get a new king called Edward VIII. Edward VIII abdicated in November. That's right, so he was never crowned. So we have this period from January to November. Nobody could have foreseen that by November he wouldn't be the king. The developer, with an eye to the market, knew that the new king's favourite royal hideaway residence was Belvedere. So he thought, right, okay, touch of the royal gold on this, get the punters in. Because the poor soul could no way could the poor builder realise that it was a bit academic when she got to the end of 36. Anyway, but that shows you what can happen if you jump the guns like this. We have got an earlier street, 1913 it was built, on Craigside called Longleat Avenue. Now Longleat Avenue there's not many, about 3 houses in it. One of them occupied by a friend of mine, but I don't think it's named that because he's there. Now Longleat Avenue, you think, why Longleat Avenue in Llandudno? And of course it's Marquis of Bath's residence, just coming online as a stately home at that era. Oh, we'll, cash in on this, bit of fame here. So you do get these, and even today we get people calling developments things like Badger's Brow. Oh, it's not true. Well, nobody's seen a badger there, and then we call it Badger's Brow. you do get these twee, that's the word, twee names. So usually the council say no, we're not having that. One or two probably slip through. And we did, oh, we've got some houses and buildings have lent their, given their names to streets. So we're coming back into the main town of it now. Llandudno Road, just across the road here, back Llandudno Road, that was named after a house, a dwelling called Llandudno. It's a big house in its own grounds, and it's just behind what is now the Premier, across the road here, big hotel. Well, behind that was this nice ornamental garden with a big house in the middle. House was demolished to make way for Arden Avenue and Llandudno Road and the big hotel on the front. So, but the name, the old property is remembered in the name. Other ones we've got Moon Street. Now Moon Street is a shortish street behind the Broadway Hotel on Mostyn Broadway. It links Mostyn Broadway itself with Adelphi Street. Now Moon Street, you think my name something random, isn't it? But actually the Broadway Hotel, the original name of that was actually Moon's Hotel. And again, I would imagine it's probably one of these semi-nicknames because it was sort of the back road alongside the hotel. It's been referred to colloquially as Moon Street, and the name is stuck. There's actually only one property in it, and that is occupied by a Chinese doctor, I think. It's been a few things over these, but it's, I think it was a conversion of an outbuilding of one of the other properties. So there was never anybody there anyway, really, but it's obviously the Chinese doctors and those. We've got the Adelphi Street I mentioned. Now Adelphi Street is again an interesting name and one that's obviously stuck. That comes about because of what we now know as the Marine Hotel. Okay? Original name of the Marine Hotel was the Adelphi Hotel, not to be confused with the one in Liverpool. If you remember the TV programme. Okay. So that's how we get Adelphi Street. We then got Court Street, just just off Upper Mostyn Street. Court Street was named because quite literally at the end of it was a small police station and a courthouse, which were built in 1869. And they were extended in 1872 and lasted there till be careful. That was the first police station. We had a lovely second police station near the railway station, which they knocked down about 5 or 6 years ago. They were a monstrosity in my view, for reasons best known to themselves. So that's Court Street. If you're wandering around Llandudno, it's worth having a look actually, because the little police station at the end, you can almost see that it is what it was. It's a nice villa. It's converted into 2 flats. Interestingly, if you look at the wall on the left-hand side as you walk down, you'll see a couple of little sort of square windows. They are the windows for the sounds. Then we get some oddities among street names, as you can imagine. We've got a Primrose Passage. Now, Primrose Passage, the claim to fame, it's only a little back alley, really. But the only building in it is what was a photographer's developing studio. Because if you think back, you don't see them nowadays because everybody's got phones, you take a picture. But, you know, from sort of Edwardian times through to the 50s, even the early 60s, you had these snappers on the prompt taking photos. And of course they were taking dozens and dozens of these photographs, and they had a laboratory, I suppose, developing studio in Primrose Passage. So why Primrose Passage, you think? It's a nice name, but it's nothing there. And again, I think it's somebody on the local authority must have a bit of a sense of humour, because Primrose, you know, I mentioned Rosebery Avenue. This runs along the back of most of Rosebery Avenue. The family name of the Roseberys was actually Primrose, because the first one was Sir Arthur Primrose. Yeah. And somebody's had a, you know, we call it Primrose. Because there was this move against towards the end of Edwardian times, about 1910, there was a lot of sort of, I think the feeling was, we don't like all these roads called back something, because originally they had stabling, little cottages, but mainly stabling. But over time the stables had been converted into dwellings or whatever, so the people were living there. They don't really want to be called back. So there was this move in 1910 to almost wholesalely rename these back streets. So Back Abbey Road became Rectory Lane. Back Charlton Street became Charlton Mews. Back Mostyn Street became Somerset Street, named after the hotel on the front that it serves. Back North Parade became Vardry Lane. Back Tidno Street became Grove Passage. You know, there's quite a few of them actually when you go into it. An interesting one on changing street names is Council Street. Now, Llandudno actually boasts the first council houses to be built in Wales, 1899. And the council, unsurprisingly and unimaginatively, called the street Council Street. This was okay for, you know, years and years and years. And in the late 70s, the then local authority, because what had happened was, and it's a reflection of social history in some ways, unfortunately, a lot the houses have become very run down. These 1899 houses have become very run down. The council were putting families in who, you know, so we say some elements of the families caused trouble. The address of Council Street was regularly featured in the columns of the Weekly News and the Advertiser in the court reports. So, Aberconwy Council decided we will renovate these and we'll convert them into sheltered accommodation, ground floor flats, and for the more agile, they'll have flats upstairs. So that's what they did. So a lady called Councillor Vicky Lazar said, I think we should rename the street and get rid of this sort of stigma that Council Street's got. because we'd already had a petition from people at the private end to rename it. We had to call them Norman Terrace. So they went out to Norman Street, Council Street. So that's what happened. Council Street became Norman Road, and the little road at the back became Norman Way, serving the flats of road. Who Norman was is something I haven't been able to find out. I will do one day, but I haven't been able to find out. The irony or the funny part that always amuses me about this, in going through all this performance to rename Council Street, they all forgot about Council Street West. So Council Street West is still called Council Street West. Nobody lives there, it's all industrial or commercial units, so it doesn't really bother anybody. Yeah, so well, Council Street's West is still there. Right. We do have, oh yeah, there was, this was a funny one. We've got a Knowles Road and a Lees Road. Council houses built in 1925. For years I hadn't got a clue why these were called Knowles Road and Lees Road. And then my son, I think, who was doing some research on the history of council housing generally at the time, he said, oh, you know, you've been wondering about this Knowles Road and Lees Road. I said, yeah. He said, well, I think I know who it's named after. He said there was a guy called Sir Lees Knowles, Baronet, who was the MP for Salford for 20 years. And Lees Knowles was very, a very philanthropic person who believed in housing the poor. And I can only think that the council at the time, they might have met him or come into contact with him or something. Oh, but you know, he was a good man, and you know, we'll call these streets after him. That's the only explanation I've been able to come up with. So thank you, son, for that, because I wouldn't have found it. You do get sort of mysteries. Oxford Road, which is the road that leads from the railway station towards Asda, as it is now. And Oxford Road is quite a well-known name, isn't it? You know, you've got Oxford Road in London, those famous shopping street around, I guess. And I wondered about this. Why was it called that? And then going past one day, I realised that going off it was Argyle Road. And why is it called Argyle Road? You know, we never had the Argyle and Sutherland Highlanders in the drill hall. So why is it called that? I was in London one day, walking down Oxford Street from here, and I came to an intersection, and one of the streets going off was called Argyle Street. So I thought, yeah, hang on a minute, this rings a bell. And what it was, when I went into it, the original plan of Mostyn Estate was that the Oxford Road, as it is now, was actually going to extend to the Links roundabout, and it was going to be a premier shopping street. So I guess Lord Mostyn or his agent or somebody had been wandering around London, oh yeah, Oxford Street, yeah. Oh yeah, they've got that Argyle Road, oh, we'll call ours Argyle Road as well, you know, and this is how these names come about. Quite, you know, once you go into it, the explanation is quite easy. We've got one or two that are named after people. There's one up at the near the hospital called McInroy Close. We named this because a chap called J.M. McInroy, OBE, was consultant surgeon at the hospital for about about 30 years actually. And he retired and he passed away. And we thought, oh, it'd be nice to name this because it's just across from the hospital. We'll name it McInroy Close because he was very well respected and had given a lot of his life to the hospital. So we got in touch with his widow and she said, oh, it's after it's a very nice thought. And so hey presto, it was named. And Mrs. McInroy went up there when the first people moved in to give them some flowers. First Brierley, or Brierley Court, is off Conway Road, a fairly new development. It commemorates the Brierley family. Now the Brierley family came from Lancashire in the early part of the 20th century. They had a garage just along here, on the site of where the flats are, which they later developed into the Odeon Cinema, which is gone. But they also kept a bit as a garage and a coach station. They were really into coaches. But they also built a new garage on Conway Road, O'Reilly's garage. And that lasted until the war, and then it was turned over for war production, I think, of material for aircraft, small parts for aircraft. But I'm not sure it ever reopened as a commercial garage. And I think the Brierleys disposed of it to the a more ordered society. When we had a general post office who rang your telephones as well, and you knew who to go to. The GPO used it as a vehicle maintenance depot. So all the little green vans and all the little red vans and the big GPO lorries used to be going in there for servicing and so on. And then it closed and it was demolished and some houses were built. But we kept the name Brierley just to commemorate the old family link. Yeah, so that more or less covers what I think I've got time for. I'm happy to take any questions. If you've got me about particular streets, even streets where you live, I might be able to.
But am I right in thinking Jubilee Street was previously Warehouse Street?
Yes.
Yeah.
Warehouse Street was the bit from Albion Street through to part of it. And then the rest of the street was built 1887. Because it was Jubilee, they renamed the whole street. But they kept the name Warehouse Street for a terrace alongside the garage going off it.
Right.
And that's still called Warehouse.
It's still, yeah. Because I'd seen the name before, and I couldn't find it anywhere, sort of thing. Then I found it obviously somewhere.
Yeah.
It'd been renamed Jubilee Street.
Yeah. But there is a Warehouse Street.
Oh, right.
But it's just off the original.
Mm.
Yeah. It's only about four houses to it. So it was conversion of outbuildings. So you.
Just thinking about the hall and the Hopeful Gardens. Is it Invalids Terrace or Invalids Walk? They probably wouldn't do that nowadays. Would it? Even though it was to do with the war, wasn't it? Was it the wounded that convalesced?
Yeah, it was more. You're right, because the word invalid didn't have the connotation we perhaps put to it today. Invalids were probably people who were just getting old.
Yeah.
And it was, a bit not too good on the legs.
Yeah,
and it was just a nice walk for them.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a pejorative sort of word in
No, this is it. It's just,
It
changed.
I mean, there are many words now you're frightened to say. No, it's, that's the reason. I mean, I think it's still called invalid.
It is, yeah.
It's got another name, hasn't it? I'm sure it's got an alternative. But most people know it as
Yeah,
invalid.
it is what, yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, but you're right, you would treat them called. Oh, that reminds me, I was going to tell you something at the beginning, because this is literally not quite hot off the press. You're saying about strange, inappropriate names for streets. There's an article in my paper last week, and an SNP council in Scotland became under fire for a ridiculous decision to name new roads on a housing estate in Ashlar Village, Glasgow. And the house builder said it was not involved and pointed the finger at Glasgow City Council. You know what I said about councillors meddling? Okay. Right, how would you like to live in one of these? Radiography Road. Right. Oh God, it gets worse. You might need to take a break. Virology Road. Laboratory Place.
Oh, I've never spelled that.
Somebody's going to go along and put I can see it coming. And this is the one that gets the vaccine drive. I mean, can you see? I mean, before they actually formally named it, you might have spent thousands and thousands on a house there. And then you put vaccine drive and it knocks about 30 grand off the house straight away. You know, it just doesn't bear thinking.
Do you think we'll start to see things like COVID way or something?
Or worse. You know, I mean, there was a redevelopment of a hospital, a former isolation hospital, nice buildings, just up the Conway Valley from here, not far, called the Roy Sunned Hospital. It was built. It was what we used to call a TV hospital. And there were 3 wards there. Scarlet fever ward, diphtheria ward, and typhoid ward, okay? Now, they're lucky they weren't in Scotland, aren't they? That's all I can say. So, yeah, it's, but these sorts of things do, and then there's a whole host of, again, what names that were quite acceptable historically, and until some interfering busybody today said, oh, I don't like that. It means so and so now, but something, all these, but they, yeah, end of the road for rude streets. For the residents of Bladder Lane, Bent Street, or Butthole Road. Kid you not? Just providing their address could be fraught with embarrassment. But they want, I mean, Butthole. The people in Butthole, I can't say this, had to put up with coachloads of US tourists visiting to have their picture taken by the sign. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The name is believed to refer to the communal water butt that was once located there. So that's part of history. It's not some rude name that somebody dreamed up 20 years ago. And Bladder Lane in Plymouth is believed to relate to the bladderwort plant which grew there. So, never know about this. There's no other explanation for Bend Street. It's probably just
Yeah, it just
literally.
depends. Yeah.
So, but sometimes it goes the other way. In Northamptonshire, residents asked for Rectory Close to revert to its original name, Cracknut Lane. I mean, what's going to the other extreme, isn't it? Converting sort of a Rectory Lane to... Anyway, we've ended on a line. Any other questions?
We live at Glannymore, which unfortunately, when you put that address in for a delivery, can be almost anywhere in Wales. It's it must be one of the most common names of streets or houses.
Yeah. Yeah, they can get a bit repetitive, don't they? I mean, everywhere seems to have a station road or a high street.
Yeah.
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 We're lucky we didn't call Mostyn Street High Street,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But Mostyn is quite distinct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all good fun, but you'll never look at the nameplate again without thinking about it. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a little about the history of the town as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you very much for that.